During the British Grand Prix, the team produced the fastest pit stop, a rapid 2.33 seconds for Lewis Hamilton. I'm joined now by Sporting Director Ron Meadows. So tell me, Ron, how do you define the perfect pit stop?
It's a difficult one to define the perfect pit stop, but the pit crew need to be in harmony with the driver. The driver needs to come in at the correct speed, he needs to stop on the marks. He needs to have all the settings ready on the steering wheel so that when he launches it doesn't wheel spin or bog down. And obviously once he's stopped, the guys have to connect to the wheel nut as quickly as possible, lift the car in the air at the same time, go back on, rattle the wheel nut back on as quick as they can, but not too much, because then you can't crack the wheel nut for the next pit stop. And obviously the jacks need to release as soon as you're finished on the guns.
And what kind of time are we talking for the real perfect pit stop?
I believe a perfect pit stop, which we've never had. We've come close on a few occasions, but I think the perfect pit stop you'll see people doing sub 1.8 seconds. But that's our 2.3 from the weekend. The pit stop was actually 2 seconds, and then you include driver reaction. So we always do ours to green light.
And you mentioned drivers. What is the hardest, greatest challenge for a driver during a pit stop?
Well, often it's a pit lane entry, because obviously you're coming in at great speed. You have to make sure you hit the marks and hit the speed limiter as quick as you can, but without losing time and not being locked up. Then you need to make sure you get into the pit box without going too fast, because the boys, it's all about hand-eye coordination with the gun. A big no-no for us is locking up too early and stopping too early, because the boys are trying to follow the nut and they have to go back. So we allow them to go too long, but no more than 20 centimeters. If they hit the marks at the right speed, that you should have a sub 2.3, 2.4 pit stop. If they don't, it can be 3-4 seconds onwards.
Looking to the other side of the pit stop, what is the hardest challenge for the pit crew?
The biggest challenge is obviously making sure all four wheels are tight before they release the car. But we practice so often. We'll do 60-70 pit stops a week when we get opportunity, and at the race we'll do another 60-70 from Thursday onwards. So we do a lot of juggling around with different people, so we're covered for every position, but we try to not, for instance, if you change the wheel gun man, you try not to take the guy putting on the left rear to replace the wheel gun guy on the front, because now you've got two corners which are messed up. We always try and introduce just the one change. Coming off is not that difficult once you've connected, and then you've got to be going straight back on, but rattling up for probably 0.2 of a second. 0.3, 0.4, you've lost 2/10. Plus, you've made it ultra difficult for the next pit stop, because as the car drives round, the wheel nuts get tighter and tighter because everything expands. And so it means your next stop's going to be slower.
And are there other things the driver has to watch out for in that situation?
Well, the driver, it's a really intense time for the driver, because obviously he's been racing around more often than not. They've had a 2-second gap between the car in front and behind, where now, if it's a safety car, for instance, they all come in together. So you've got to find your pit crew and not go to the wrong one, which has happened on many occasions. And then he has to have a belief in the crew that when we release him, we're not going to release him into traffic. And that's a real challenge, and that's a high pressure situation, not just with the driver, but also the people controlling the lollipop and the lights. Because you've seen many times where they've come out and lost a wing or lost a position, and last thing we want to do is leave the box and lose a position. But we'll accept that, because we know on track we can overtake people, so we don't want to cause any issues in the pit lane.
The drivers have their responsibilities and the pit crew does, but are there any other factors that could affect a pit stop?
Well, a lot of it's to do with grip in the pit lane. For instance, for a wet race, we wouldn't lay rubber, because often during practice sessions we'll lay rubber to help give it more grip when you stop. For a wet race, you don't want that, because water and rubber don't mix. So it's all about getting traction out of there and having a clear run into the fast lane. We have the pit lane, we have the slow lane, then we have the fast lane. At most races, but some tracks it's quite a narrow pit lane, and they'll reduce the speed limit from 80 to 60. And that's really quite difficult, because there's probably only 3 or 4 meters from where the hoses end on the gantry to where the pit wall is. And you've got to try and feed another car in alongside them to race. And these cars are 1.8 meters wide each, and next year they're going to be 2 meters. So it's going to be more difficult next year releasing.
So over the weekend you had a few double pit stops.
We call it a stack scenario, which is when both cars are entering the pits on the same lap. And ideally you'll want at least a 6 or 7 second gap, because otherwise the second car is going to lose time, especially if he's got traffic behind him. So it's always good to get a 6 or 7 second gap, ideally a 10-second gap, because the rear jack guy has got to lift this car, drop it and get out of the way, otherwise the second car is going to run him over. But it's a scenario we practice a lot back at base, and it worked out perfectly. We were very fortunate that we had the gap between the cars and we didn't lose any places, because more often than not the second car will lose a place, and that happened to Ferrari, I believe. They came in one lap before us, and I think Kimi was the second car and lost some places, but there's not much you can do about it, because you're not allowed to slow people down in the pit lane, so you just have to come in at your normal speed. But yeah, it worked out very well, and all 4 stops it was went just as we practiced it, so that was nice.
How are you practicing for next year? Are there any other methods you have to apply?
I think next year is going to be a little tougher on the guys, because the wheels are bigger and heavier, and obviously the ergonomics of taking the wheel off and putting it on is going to be a new challenge, and maybe we'll have to mix some people around, because it's probably going to be helpful if you've got long arms.
I think there'll be a bit more weight required.
Yeah, probably if the boys go to the gym a lot, and I think they'll have to continue that, because the wheels and tyres are going to be 3 or 4 kilos heavier each, which a one-off pit stop in a race is not so bad, but when we do 20 odd stops in a session, it can take it out of you, and we're fortunate to have a physio who helps us, and trainers and things, but it's like you can go to pick a piece of paper off the floor and you can hurt your back. But next year is going to be a challenge for everyone, and we like challenges in this team.